So first, let's talk about the initial setup. Sorry for the sound, it's coming from my camera microphone, but it's just to show you the setup anyway. So it's a very normal setup. This is the Boost Junior that I got for cheap because the reverb inside doesn't work. Nothing has been changed. Not an amazing amp, but not a bad amp too. It's a pretty cheap one, pretty small. Boxy, doesn't have a lot of lows. I will show you the settings here, and if it doesn't matter, but what matters about the settings is that my mentality to it is to put it as quiet as I could, obviously. Push a little bit the volume so I get a little bit of grit. Even on the clean tone, it's a little bit less brittle, it's got more body. And I'm tweaking the middle, bass and treble until I'm hearing that it's too much. Like I start at 0, then push, and then at some point it gets too harsh, so I back it off a little bit. For the mids, at some point it gets too boxy, I back it off. And for the bass, at some point it starts to saturate and lose headroom, so I just back it off. So that's how I do it pretty much. And for the master, yeah, the quietest possible until it sounds very bad and muffled. No fat switch here. And for the miking technique, that's like 80% of the sound. So what I'm using is a very, again, humble setup, not even a mic stand, you know, it's like a shoe here. So the first microphone is a Shure 545. This is from the 70s, but it's not expensive. I got it for £50 something. This is a Sennheiser 421, but you can use another Shure 545 or 57. But the thing that makes it sound bigger than what it is, this amp, is this microphone. Again, using something that's not a mic stand, this is like a TLR audio inline preamp boxes, and it's miking the back of the speaker, and the phase in between both microphones is reversed. Like the phase of this one is reversed, obviously. That's how you can get like a kind of like a fake room sound, but also has a lot of lows and low mids. But you have to flip the phase, otherwise it will sound very weird, which can be cool, but it's not what we want here today. And so it is going into that big thing there, which is, again, it looks fancy, but it's not expensive. It's like a 5 preamp box. It cost me around like £90 per preamp, very much. So it's pretty cheap. The only thing is that it has an EQ here, which is useful to make a small amp sounds bigger, because you can push the low end here and tame the highs on one of the microphones. And here I decided to do it on the Sennheiser here, because it was a bit harsh and it had to tame it a little bit. Also, something I noticed is that the speaker inside this amp is clipping, and not in a very nice way actually. It's kind of crackling a little bit. I don't know if it's broken or something like that maybe, but it's not great. So you're gonna hear that also a little bit in the video sometimes when I push it a little bit too much with the gain or stuff like that. So it's gonna sound a bit like this, but you know, it's part of the sound and it still doesn't distract us from the point of this video. So it's 3 microphones, one in the back, flip phase, going there in a very non-ideal space. As you can see, like nothing is perfect here. Just random shit in there. So this is very normal, and the cables, and then the computer is just here. So it means that I'm playing here and the amp is there. So it's like nothing's great, but we can make it sound great anyway. Let's give it a try.
So that was the setup. Now let's talk about all this. But first, let's talk about the sweet spot. The sweet spot is where you get as less noise in the room as possible. And for that, you need to move around with your guitar and some gain to find the sweet spot. I'm going to show you the difference. If you play with single coils guitar like me and pretty cheap guitars too, it's going to matter a little bit. This is obviously not in the sweet spot, but if I move a little bit, greatly reduce the buzz. No. Kind of yes. So I'll give you an idea. First thing to do is to find your sweet spot in your room. Then let's talk about the gear now. So the first thing that we can talk about is preamp pedal. Here I'm using this little green thing. It's the Henrietta Engineering Emerald Prince preamp, which is his version of the EP booster circuit. So you can use, if you don't have the money, you can use any cheap EP booster clone for like £40 or something like this. And it's going to give you a similar result. What it gives you an EQ shape, a little bit of harmonics, and some compression. I will show you how it sounds right now. So you see what it adds, pretty nice. Here what we're trying to emulate is an amp that is pushed, and an amp that is pushed gives you more compression and more harmonics without sounding obviously saturated at first. So that's what we're trying to emulate. And then the other pedal that goes with that is this one here, the Maxon CP9 Plus Pro compressor. You don't need to have this one. You can use, actually I would recommend to use something with a dry wet, so you can have a lot of compression and sustain and then blend it in subtly, like 20%-ish or something, to simulate the fact that the amp has a lot of sustain. That's not what I have, so I'm going to use what I have here, which is this pedal. At the end of the chain, even if most people use compressor at the beginning of the chain, but here I'm trying to simulate the amp compressing. So for that, I put it at the end, so all my effects, delays, and modulation get amplified a little bit too. It's very subtle, like very low ratio, not too much gain reduction, but it gives you that sound I'm going to show you right now. And like that, you can have a clean tone that sounds pretty pushed. And it's a first good step to having a loud amp sound with a very clean and quiet setup. Because at the moment I will show you the sound, it's not super loud. I'm give you the camera audio. Like I can talk over it and it's fine. It's not super loud. So that's pretty cool. That's the first step. Second step is stacking gain pedals. I've got 3 gain pedals here, 1 double, 1 single. The first one I'm going to talk about is this side of the red pedal, the blue side. It's called the Helium Overdrive. The red pedal is discontinued, but the Helium, you can buy it if you want. But actually, I will recommend something more like a blues driver that doesn't push the mids too much, because you're not trying to imitate having more high end. You're actually trying to preserve the lows a little bit. This one had mids, and it's still useful, and I will show you why. But first, let's see what it adds to the clean tone. It adds another layer of compression, because when you're digging in and you're hitting harder, it adds saturation. But also if I'm playing quieter, it's pushed the quieter part a bit up. So it's adding another layer of compression and saturation, which is closer to what an amp will do actually. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but when you're compressing, you're adding another dynamic to the signal. You got less dynamic range, so you can play more with quieter parts because they get louder. So that's one of the saturation you can use. But let's say you want to use an overdrive sound. So my main overdrive sound for today is going to be the Vemiram Jan Ray. It's super expensive and clearly not justified, in my opinion. But you can get any clone like this, clone of a Timmy that sounds the same. But the thing is, I'm using this one because I'm lucky enough to have it, but also because it has a bass. No, but that's very important, because you want your overdrive pedal to preserve the bass as much as possible. I'm going to show you how it sounds in a second. On the bridge pickup. So it compresses a lot and it preserves, the low end information, which is very important. And also you can preserve the high end a little bit. So that's a nice thing. And if you pair it with the Helium, that's where you get a bit more of a Marshall pushed type of sound, because it pushed the mid in a very nice way. So you see it sounds, it's got that mid push. It's great for a chorus or stuff like that because it gives you a little bit like a push, almost if you're putting a clean amp through a distorted, like loud amp already, it gives you that push, like a little bit of a tube screamer type of thing without the obvious saturation. That's the point. You can still keep it kind of clean, like if you're playing quieter. Lowering the volume on the guitar. And then when it digs in, you can put the volume back on your guitar and start to really rock a bit more. Pretty nice. So that's one way to get like a very nice and angsty sound without pushing the saturation and still having the sustain of it because it's quite sustainy at the moment. I cut it myself because it's too long. But that gives you one way to get a kind of crunchy tone without pushing the gain too much. So that's one step. Now, let's say that you have a big ego because you're a guitarist and you want to play fast runs and solos, but you're bad at guitar, so you need a lot of sustain. For that, what you can do with a quiet amp is push the gain on your initial overdrive to get that kind of tone. So it's kind of like gainy, but not enough because you're a bad player, so you need more gain. So you can use this one to give it a little bit of mid-range push, cut through the mix. And now you can use another overdrive, the last one, to add the sustain that you need. And you can play your blues rock noodling as much as you want. And you got enough sustain because you're stacking overdrive, you're stacking compression, and you got compression and preamp happening, and it sounds cool. So that's another way also to get that big sound without a loud amp. Now, as a bonus, I'm going to talk about a way to add a bit more of like a live or studio recording type of sound if you don't have a reverb pedal but a delay, is to use a delay like this one that is digital and pretty clean, but very subtly. So it only plays when you stop playing. It's almost faking like it's got a ducking function of it. See, when I play a lot of notes, it doesn't play. So it doesn't clutter the sound. You can do whatever you want. Weird stuff like this. And then you stop playing. And it appears. That's a good way to do it. I think that's a good way to have like an indie sound. If you're adding the helium on top of it and lower a bit your volume part, you got some nice tone like this. Pretty sweet. So that's another way to get a nice tone using all your modulation and everything and get still a nice sound out of a quiet amp. And if you're taking the modulation out and using a tremolo and push a bit more, you get a bit more of a blues rock type of sound. And if you try something else and you use your main overdrive, and let's say you still have the big egos, you still need a lot of gain. So using it like this doesn't work on clean sound. So you can lower the volume of your guitar and get a very nice clean sound, because most of the loud amps, they saturate on stage. So to have a clean sound, we need to lower the volume. You can do that too with an overdrive and give you a similar feeling. Push a bit more for a bit more intensity. You still get definition. You push a bit more. And now you push it a lot, go to the bridge pickup, and you got your rock sound. And that's it. Hope you liked the video. If you have any question, don't hesitate to ask. I know it's very hard to record quiet amp and get a big sound at home. I struggled with that for years. Ask me anything, and in the meantime, have fun and au revoir.